Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Tuong, the now bi-weekly escape from reality show where I get to talk to my friends near and far to talk about, the things that matter. Superheroes dressed in blue and red, a little bit of black, some white triangles on his face. I'm getting ahead of myself. Who could it be? Guess what? I have someone else that's even better than the movie that we're talking about today.
Oh, wow.
That is high praise. You know that coming from me as a huge something fan. I won't say it, but I'm an even bigger fan of this person, Emily Lambert, everyone. Hello.
Hey, Tuong, how's it going?
You know, I'm good. You know what? Actually, I'm sore. I'll tell you that. This is a quick tangent. I was introducing myself to the new neighbor across the street. I was in the park. They have a dog. I have a dog. And they're like, hey, that's your dog, Captain Meatball. I'm like, yeah, that's my dog. Just trying to be the cool neighbor around the park. And he's like, my name's Zach. What's your name? I'm like, my name is And as soon as I try to introduce myself, my dog wraps his long leash around my leg and pulls forward and I flip onto my back. So that was my morning and I'm very, very sore.
It literally sounds like the scene from I don't know, a cartoon or something.
I think my life is a cartoon. I don't know. How about yours? Is your life a cartoon?
I don't know. I had a moment yesterday where I was in a store, went to the mall trying to get some deals, and I saw a girl that I thought I knew and was like, hey, how's it going? And I had a whole thing. And then halfway through the conversation, realized that I did not know who she was. And so that was my embarrassing moment of the week. And
that's incredible.
Kept me up all night last night thinking about how bad I felt about that.
You might have made this person's day.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I was pretty embarrassed about it, to be honest.
So once you realize, were you just like, well, have a good day, and you ran away?
I think I played it off pretty good, actually. I was like, hey, I know you from so-and-so, right? She's like, no. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were somebody else. I'm going to go now. Have a good day. I just booked it out of the store.
Did you do one of those awkward things where it's just it's just really hard to see under the mask,
I did do that. That's everyone's favorite excuse. And honestly, I use it all the time.
It's a good excuse. It's a great excuse. I find it strange when people do recognize me underneath the mask, I mean, good for them, I guess, but all you're going on is my big forehead and my eyeballs. So,
I guess you have very expressive eyes. Again, all part of your life as a cartoon character. That's how people recognize you.
Well, Emily, you've known me for a little bit. What cartoon would you, project on me? Any cartoon at all?
I don't know. The hijinks in your life, I feel like I get kind of Bugs Bunny vibes.
Bugs Bunny, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I could just picture the whole twisted, Captain Meatball twisting around your feet. Definitely feels like some Wile E. Coyote kind of thing.
It did feel like a trap, and he didn't check on me afterwards, so I was upset. Emily, you've never stepped foot in the pod cavern before. Do you want to give a little introduction to who you are?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. Friends with Tuong. That's my main identifier.
I don't want to, you don't have to have that as your number one title. Emily Lambert, Friends with Tuong. I'm pretty sure there's more.
That's how the people know me. No, a little bit about myself. I mean, Tuong and I, we're friends at work. It's kind of fun. We actually work on a podcast together at work. So It's kind of fun to be on the other side of it a little bit. I mean, for you, Tuong, you're already a host there. So it's not that different. Although
but
I'm sure the content
let
it down.
More fun here. Yeah, I get to, I do I have different layers of Tuong. I'm like an onion, I'm like Shrek.
Exactly.
But on Talking Tuong, I can just be myself, not that I'm not myself on the other podcast, which I won't say right now, but you got to be professional because it's work.
Exactly. And you're talking about government procurement. So, that's always a lot of fun.
Which we're not going to talk about today.
No, let's not talk about it
do that
at all. Yeah, I don't know about me. I'd say I'm a pretty big nerd, hence why we're on the podcast today. I feel
Hmm.
like I've got definitely some nerdy takes on the movie we're going to talk about today. And especially I'm a huge like Disney nerd, and I feel like sometimes Disney nerds get a pretty bad rap, but I feel like I'm not like a Disney adult, if that is any kind of differentiation there.
I don't know the
Um,
difference there. What is the difference there?
I don't know. I don't have like a bunch of collectibles and
As
really
I
annoying.
hide some collectible stuff in my background right now.
I've got like a couple in my background too here, but I feel like it's not over the top. But
Yeah.
definitely like huge Disney fan. I'm also a big reader, so trying to reach a goal of reading 100 books by the end of the year, which I literally just before coming on this podcast just surpassed. So pretty proud of that one. So
Congratulations. That's
yeah, thank
huge.
you.
You know,
Thank you.
I I have to say something. Not a reflection on book readers because I'm not one. I used to read a little bit. I do some audiobooks here and there, but I'm not. I need it to be read to me like an adult. But I guess, what do you think is the what's the word I'm trying to think about? There is some sort of differentiation where people are like, I'm gonna read 100 books, and everyone's like, good on you, 100 books. And I can be like, hey, I'm gonna play 100 video games, and they'll be like, freaking nerd, go do something better with your life. And I'm like, but what
I
what do
think
you
because
think?
people assume I'm reading something intellectual when meanwhile I'm reading like young adult fantasy novels, which are like not that intellectual, but they're a lot of fun.
Sure, yeah.
So I think people can make assumptions about what exactly I'm reading. I don't, unless they ask me, I don't usually elaborate on what I'm reading, but
Yeah,
I
because
think
some
that's
people I
probably it.
ask, like, what do you, well, there's like some adults. Maybe these are not the Disney adults you're talking about, like full on mature adults, where I'm like, what are you reading? And they're like, I'm reading on how to do taxes better next year. And I'm like, what?
That sounds
Why?
terrible. That sounds like a terrible use of your time.
Right? Okay. What's your favorite book? 100 books you've read. What's your favorite?
Oh man. Um, wow, you're really putting me on the spot here. I'd say like I really got into one author in particular. His name is Frederick Bachman. He's a Swedish author who does some really great contemporary books that actually the reason I got into him was through our works book club that we have every month. So I kind of read one of his books at the beginning of the year, really got hooked on his stuff. And then I've read a couple other of his books this year, and everything's just like a 5-star read for me. So that would
Five
definitely be,
stars.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
They're like perfect in my mind, but
Oh my God.
I know.
This is
So,
this is
pretty
crazy,
good.
everyone. People don't know this. Emily's a huge critic for everything in life.
Yeah, you know me, a very critical
Yeah, as
person.
soon as she met me, the first things that she said out of my life to me was, "You're a 2-star person," and I'm like, "Wow!" And now you're giving 5-star
Yeah,
reviews to books.
exactly. To books. Yeah. Brings me more joy than I guess our conversations do.
I like to think I've reached to the level of 3 to 4 stars, maybe 3.5 now.
Oh
Okay.
no, Ton, you're a 5-star person.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess you're a much more easygoing person now. You're just handing out 5 stars everywhere. Let's get into the news of the week because I really want to talk about the movie because that's going to take a lot of our time today. And I really don't want to, make a 3-hour podcast on something because we definitely could, but I won't. I'm going to restrain myself. So a few just fluff news stories. This used to be a weekly show for the people at home that remember. So it used to be, every single week I would hit you with the latest and the greatest of whatever headlines that I found on IGN.com. Now that it's a bi-weekly show, I kind of just mishmash whatever is the headlines that I'm like, oh, that seems kind of interesting. And I'm going to throw that to Emily today. So, Emily, news story number one, Shang-Chi 2 director would love to get a Jackie Chan for the sequel.
Oh, interesting.
Thoughts? Are you a Jackie Chan person?
I don't wouldn't say that I am a Jackie Chan person. I don't think I've actually ever seen a Jackie Chan movie in my
What?
life.
This
Yeah, no, I'm
is
thinking
what?
about it.
Shut it down. Shut this whole podcast down. Why are we doing it on this movie? Well, I'll tell you why later. But what? Yeah, you got to come back and we got to do a Jackie Chan movie. Come
I
on.
guess so. I mean, and then I'll have like a real like natural organic reaction to it as someone who's never watched Jackie Chan in my life, and I'll bring that reaction.
You liked the like kinetic and choreography energy of Shang-Chi, right? Like the martial arts
Oh
in
yeah,
it.
absolutely. It's really good.
Like it's very inspired by old Jackie Chan movies where it's
Hmm.
kind of like, well, like in Shang-Chi, it's very choreographed and there's not a lot of like random action happening, but there's a little bit of it. And with Jackie Chan, the thing that made him popular was he's obviously does his own stunts. That's the big thing, right? But the other thing was just like he's always playing like this everyday man or whatever kind of thing, or even if he's a cop or whatever, he gets put in these situations that nobody should be put in, and he's kind of like making it up on the fly. That's what it looks like on screen. So he could be like, "Oh, there's a bucket next to me. I'm going to use this bucket to kick it on this guy's head. Oh, I'm going to use this like I don't know scaffolding to like fight these bad guys," kind of like what Shang-Chi did. So I think you'd like it.
Yeah, I mean, I should be this movie that I watched.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
it's so
so.
funny. So this is a little known fact about me, but I actually went to school for film studies. And it's funny because like what I'm doing for work right now is not related to it whatsoever. But I feel like people are always like, you went to film like school for film study. Have you not seen like some of these like most famous, like how have you not seen a Jackie Chan movie? Like, I don't know, we're watching like The Godfather and like I don't
Yeah.
know, like these like
Yeah,
other like really obscure movies. So I don't know. I
that's
didn't get the
fair.
chance to watch those fun ones. So now that I'm, graduated and everything, it's time to do it.
I think we could make a fun film studies class where maybe not film studies because I would not have anything like insightful to say like professors probably do about it. But I think I can compile a pretty kick-ass list of be like, you should watch these movies because I feel like that's what film studies is. It's like, hey, here's the greatest movies and this is why they're great. And let's analyze the meaning of life in every single one of these movies
Oh
and
yeah.
that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's that's exactly it. So we just need to make like a fun class. Like here are the most fun movies, or here are the ones that like actually made like an impact. I feel like on. I think you get some of that a little bit, but I think I would definitely take that class and be happy to co lead it with you.
Amazing.
Again,
Well,
I
it'll just
probably
be
wouldn't be
Disney
able
movies.
to. Yeah, something. All right, we're watching Encanto, obviously, and that's the first on my list. That's the first on my mind because I just finished watching that
You
one.
watched it? No
Yeah, it was really
spoilers because I
good.
haven't seen it yet. Did you like it?
I loved it.
You loved
It was
it?
so
Okay.
good. You
All
should
right.
watch it. I think you'll like it.
I can't believe I haven't watched it yet. I can't believe you beat me to watching a Disney
Yeah, that's
movie.
fair. That's true.
Okay, next, this headline, I feel like I shouldn't even, I'm going to read it anyways. For those of you who know, James Cameron made a very famous movie, not Titanic. He's done a bunch of famous movies. What am I saying? But he made one of the highest selling movies of all time. Sometimes it still is, still somehow like, hits records even now. Avatar. Now, he wanted to make a quadology, I guess. Is that what it's called? Of movies. And it's been in the pipeline for years and years and years. And people forget what Avatar was even about at this point. It made a lot of money because it looked pretty and it was 3D and all this other stuff. It's been like 13 years, I think, since Avatar's come out, something crazy. And now this headline says Avatar 2, Jake and Neytiri started a family, including an adopted human. And I'm like, does anyone care? Or who are these people?
I literally like don't remember those. Like I definitely watched Avatar when it came out. I don't remember who those people are.
I
So
think they're the
that's
main
not
two
the main
people.
character.
Yeah.
Main characters. Okay. Well, I don't. I really don't care. That's so funny. I remember when they announced this years ago that he was going to make all these new Avatar movies, and I was just thinking, like, where, like, is that even started, or is it just he's still just talking about it?
Yeah, apparently they've been trying to. I don't follow it too closely, but I think they've written number 2 and 3 and they've started like making it at the same time kind of thing. But it's the slowest movie. Like, does anyone want to watch it? I'm gonna watch it because it's been in production for so long, but like I forgot who these characters were, and I'm like, do I care that they adopted a human? So,
Yeah,
uh,
I'll probably watch it when it comes out, but I gotta say it's not one of those movies that are on my like most anticipated list,
you're not gonna rush to the theaters to like buy a
No,
ticket, put double masks
no. One
on,
thing I think about Avatar was that it was so like innovative at its time, but I feel like with like the motion capture technology and everything, like everyone was like so hyped about the technology
Yes.
behind it. And I think now, like, I mean, like he says, in 13 years, that that's not really the most innovative technology. So I feel like they'd have to do something again that's like groundbreaking in movies. Otherwise, like I feel like the story was basically just like Pocahontas, but like on another planet. And like like if it's just if it's going to be just a cookie cutter story again, like I don't see the appeal of it. I think it was really that technology that got everyone so hyped about it. So I feel like unless they do something like that again, like I'm really not gonna care that much about it.
Here's how you make it, you elevate it to the next level. You get people to tickle you while while the movie's playing, and that will, because the movie theaters can't afford anything better than people tickling you, I guess.
Why tickling?
Because it's like the wind in your hair and the wind at your feet. You're getting like a 4D effect. I realize there's movie theaters out there that have that kind of thing, but the movie theater that I'm picturing is much more personal. We hire ticklers to do it for you, or plan B. I can see that Emily wasn't that gung-ho about the tickling idea. So the good thing I have a bunch of ideas to throw at you. Idea number 2 is they make everyone into blue people by the end of the movie, like in the theater. So you're watching the movie, you're like, oh man, I really want to become an avatar. I guess I forget what they're called. Navi. They're called Navis. I can't believe I remember that. And then
Tuong, the only reason I know that is because there's, again, back to my Disney nerdisms. There's literally a ride at Disney World called Navi River Journey. So it's the only reason why I know that, because there's a whole Pandora world at Disney World.
Right. I gotta pick your brain about that in just a second. But what if they turned everyone into Navi in the movie theater by the end of it? Think about it.
Yeah, sure. That sounds like a great idea. I'm trying to think through the logistics of that. That seems like not super illegal.
And then I'd be like, oh shit, now I'm just a blue person for the rest of my life.
So is that for the rest of your life? It's not just a marketing gimmick.
We don't know how to reverse it.
This seems like a villain origin story.
Yeah. But we'd have those cool ponytails that we get to put on things.
That, you know what? You raise a good point. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Imagine just, trying to connect with your partner at home and be like, hey, do you want to attach ponytails with one another?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. No. Okay. Too much. Too far. Emily, you're going to Disney World soon, right?
Yeah. Well, Omicron pending.
How is your thoughts on all this?
My thoughts are basically, unless the borders are closed again, I'm going. This is the trip that we had planned for 2020, and of course, RIP to all 2020 vacations. Had to reschedule, and of course, COVID was like looking like numbers were better. People getting vaccinated, great, whatever. We booked our trip, and then of course, everything with this new variant came. So we'll see. We'll see if it happens. I'm like trying not to get my hopes up too much because who knows what's going to happen. I
hope you can go. Just so you can go ride that Pandora ride.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I haven't been since all the new Pandora stuff has opened, and it looks so cool. Like
actually,
I really want to.
It's like a whole section, right?
It's a whole world, like at Animal Kingdom. Yeah, so they have like 2 rides, and the one, not the Navi River Journey, but the other one is apparently quite impressive, and everyone says it's one of the best rides at Disney. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
I'm just baffled that Avatar has this much staying power in pop culture that they made a whole world at Disney World for this.
And it's, again, I think the thing was when they announced it, like Avatar had already been out for years and years. Everyone's like, we don't care about it anymore. But apparently the world at Disney is very cool. So you know.
Yeah. Wow. That's great. Well, when you go buy me a Navi wig when you come home so I can put it on and do the ponytail thing.
If it fits in my luggage, you got it.
Perfect. That's all I want. That's all I want from Disney World. Okay, I have a bunch of other stories, but you know what? I'd much rather talk about the movie of the week because, again, it's going to be a lengthy conversation. So, Emily, I'll get you to introduce the movie for us.
Okay. We'll do a little drum roll or something. I don't know.
Sure, whatever you want.
I'll just announce it. Today we're talking about Spider-Man No Way Home.
We tampered with the stability of space-time. The multiverse is a concept about which we know frighteningly little. The problem is you trying to live 2 different lives. The longer you do it, the more dangerous it becomes.
Hello, Peter.
boy, Spider-Man No Way Home. There is so much to say about this movie. And we're doing this episode, I think, 3 weeks out from when it got released. So I think good timing. I think with the new format of Talking Tong, I usually would have like jumped on it sooner, but I really wanted people to watch the movie first before I started talking about it. Don't want to give out those
definitely gonna be spoilers.
There will be spoilers. This is not a non-spoiler cast. Although I will say that at the beginning, maybe I'll set up that non-spoilery takes, and then we'll get into spoilers, I guess. Okay, so first of all, let's start with your attachment with Spider-Man, and just the character itself, and then we'll talk about the movies before that, specifically the Tom Holland movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I've always been like a pretty big Spider-Man fan. Like I've never been like a comics girl. Like I've never read any of the comics, but I feel like all the different Spider-Man movies have come out like peak a time when I could enjoy them to their fullest. Like Tobey Maguire ones definitely have a special place in my heart. And it's funny, I like was rewatching them in anticipation for this podcast to kind of reference them a little bit. And yeah, they definitely like they hold a special place in my heart. I would say definitely not my favorite Spider-Man movies, but I think when they came out, I was like preteen / teenager, and I was like really into the whole MJ Peter Parker romance. And I think that's like the thrust of those movies is the drama of that. But you know what? When I was like at that age when they came out, I love that stuff. I ate that up. So yeah. I really loved those movies when they came out, and they were definitely something I watched a lot. I had them all on like VHS back in the day. Actually, maybe not the third one. Third one may have came out after VHS was a thing. Definitely. But so those ones I really did enjoy. The Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans. I also like those were also like a peak time for me because I'm pretty sure the first one came out like right after like the same year as Avengers. And that was kind of when I started really getting into like superhero movies and really enjoying Marvel and kind of getting into the MCU and everything. So I really love those movies when those came out as well. So I have really good memories of just like going to theaters for all those movies and just really, really enjoying them and really having a special place in my heart. And then of course, Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, again, like bringing him into the MCU and even having his introduction be so much different from all the other Spider-Man movies. I just absolutely fell in love with those right away. And I've been a fan, like every single one that's come out. They've been like some of my favorite Marvel movies. So I feel like all of them, like all the different series have a very special place in my heart, but I think for very different reasons. And I think they just came out at a time where I could just appreciate them so much. So yeah, I think as far as like a favorite of them, I don't know. Maybe we'll chat a little bit more about as far as the different elements of those movies. But that's definitely kind of my relationship with the Spider-Man movies coming out. I've really enjoyed them.
And like the character itself, the comic book character, he's been like ingrained in pop culture, society globally. Like people around the world can dress up as Spider-Man. Everyone would be like, that's Spider-Man. It's the same with like Superman and Batman, right? Like you just know who these characters are. I would say Spider-Man even more so. He's like massive. Did you, when you were younger, before you even watched the movies, like love Spider-Man too? Or you just knew who he was kind of thing?
Yeah, I feel like, well, the first one came out when I was only like 6 or 7 when the first movie came out. So I feel like that the Tobey Maguire for me in my head is like almost like the quintessential Spider-Man. Because to me, that's the original, just because that came out when I was so young. Yeah. But yeah, I think you're right. I think there is something so universal. I think just like Spider-Man is like, he just has such great hero traits. Like I think even compared to like a Superman or a Batman, I feel like Spider-Man is just like more relatable and fun. Like he's just so funny, and like anything is just of him is just so enjoyable to watch. I mean, I feel like every kind of those big superheroes have like their own elements of things to be admired and things about their movies and the pop culture around them that's to be enjoyed. But I think there's something about Spider-Man that just sets him apart. That just is like he's just like an everyday guy, and like it's just a lot of fun to just Yeah, he's just a really funny guy. I feel like that's also part of the reason why I love everything Spider-Man as well.
Yeah, like he is, you're right. The relatable word is very apt for him because he's not super. Like he's just a kid who got bit by a spider and then he has to go through everyday life and he struggles hard. Like that is very relatable, right? And he doesn't want anyone to know who he is and he still has to go to school, he has to pay his rent. Like it's just like it's much more interesting, I think, in a lot of ways than I'm rich and my parents are dead or whatever it is, that kind of thing. But although Batman is interesting in his own way, it's just too dark sometimes, I guess.
Right, exactly.
I guess for myself here, just to quickly give you, insight on my relationship with Spider-Man is I have a Spider-Man costume that I've wear a lot, I guess.
Oh,
Or
I've seen
not
it.
a lot.
I've seen
You
the
see
Spider-Man
some of it.
costume.
I have the mask, I have the suit. It doesn't fit as much anymore because I'm getting a little bit away, but that's okay. But I feel it when you put on the mask. You feel like, yeah, I'm Spider-Man. I think there's something special about that character. When you put it on, you feel like the character. You'll do the poses and whatever. So I would argue that he is my favorite superhero, point blank. Him and Captain America are like up and up, but I would say Spider-Man is my legacy character that I just love so much as a kid and I adore still now, probably even more. So before I watched this movie here, I watched all of the live action Spider-Man movies. So Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and then Holland movies, including like Civil War and stuff like that. Like, Holland has an interesting trajectory with his movies is because he gets to have character development outside of his movies, right? Like Infinity War, he gets to have a big moment. In Endgame, he has to have a big moment, right? But with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, they're much more siloed into their own universe. So my thoughts on rewatching it all was Tobey Maguire. I think they're very classic Spider-Man movies. Like you said, I think there's a lot of nostalgia that I pull from it when I watch it, but I think they are very good story structure movies. Like I think they tell the villain story really well for Green Goblin in the first movie and Doc Ock in the second movie, and much less so for Sandman and Venom in the third movie and emo Spider-Man in the third movie. It's just too much. But my overall thoughts about Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man is that he plays pathetic very, very well. It's like it's ridiculous because those movies are so cheesy, and when you rewatch it now, it's just everything is so dramatic and melodramatic, and MJ never smiles. I feel like in those old movies, like she's always getting captured. She's happy for a second, and then she'd be like, "Peter, why don't you love me?" And then Tobey Maguire's weird crying face that he makes. He's like, "I can't love you, MJ." Like it's a lot. But I do remain that Spider-Man 2, the second one with Doc Ock, is still one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. It is cheesy, like those old movies, but I do think that they tell the story perfectly, and that the villain is a lot more interesting than a lot of the villains that we've seen in the MCU as a whole, because you have a redemption arc to Doc Ock where he's bad and then he's good at the end, right? Like his last final moments is that he's going to take down the power of the sun with him into the ocean. That's nerdy stuff. Moving on, Andrew Garfield, I think he got the short end of the stick. I don't think this is news to anybody. Like his Spider-Man movies were supposed to reboot the Spider-Man in a big way, the Amazing Spider-Man movies. And I think his Peter Parker is way too cool. Did you watch them, rewatching any of them?
Yeah, I rewatched the first one last night, and then I was going to rewatch the second one, but then it was like too late. I went to bed. So, yeah, but yes, I feel like I got the gist of it again from rewatching the first one.
Do you get the vibe that like his Peter Parker is like way too like cool like that? I'm like, he's like riding a skateboard around and he's just like, he's charming for sure. He plays a teenager pretty good, but he's also like, like a rapscallion too. He's stealing IDs and he's like saying all these quippy things that don't feel very Spider-Man until he puts on the mask.
Yeah, I think like I have some mixed opinions about it for sure. Like I do appreciate that Andrew Garfield Spider-Man does utilize like his love for science so much more as Peter Parker. I feel like Tobey Maguire, everyone says that he's good at science, but we never really see him get to like actually enact that. Whereas with Andrew Garfield's, I feel like he really does use that. It's like one of his strengths.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to my husband about this actually, because this is my take as well. Like he'd be so cool. Like honestly, like the movie tries to like set him up as someone who's always bullied, but I'm like, in real life, he would not be bullied like
No,
that. He would
he'd be the
actually be way
coolest
cooler.
guy in school.
Yeah, right.
He
Like he's like a
stands up to a
skater
bully
guy.
right away.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
but Peter Parker's supposed to be kind of pathetic.
Yeah,
Right?
so it's interesting. I've never read the comics, so I actually don't really know the background. I
Sure.
was talking to my husband about it, and he was kind of saying that in the comics, apparently, again, this is his take,
Sure,
not
sure.
mine, but apparently it was really kind of Tobey Maguire Spider-Man that really set up Peter Parker supposed to being
Mm.
so pathetic and nerdy. Like apparently he is like Peter Parker's still the nerd and like not like a cool kid necessarily. But I think Tobey Maguire Spider-Man kind of set up that precedent of this kind of like yeah, just like this kind of not cool, kind of pathetic kind of guy as
Mhm,
Peter
mhm.
Parker. So I think that kind of yeah, arrange my perspective a little bit because
Yeah.
I think Andrew Garfield, I think I still appreciate him as Peter Parker, but I would agree. I think like there's almost a level of like he's a bit too cool.
Yeah, I should say that like I don't need him to be as pathetic as Tobey Maguire because he goes through some really like, oh my God, like this guy is always down on his luck. Where I feel like Andrew Garfield is, yeah, I don't know. Him riding a skateboard and then having a montage to the soundtrack to Coldplay as he's like doing a bunch of weird stuff in like a abandoned like garage or whatever. It's just like I don't know what's happening here. But his Spider-Man is very good, arguably the best. Like when he puts on the mask, his quips are really good. I feel like he interacts with the neighborhood more, like he's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I feel that. Whereas like Tobey Maguire, he's not really saying anything funny as he's fighting. He's just kind of like doing cool shit. But like Andrew Garfield is like helping kids, talking to the people, getting the people to rally around him. And I feel like that's much more Spider-Man to me. Like, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think they tried to do that in the Tobey Maguire movie. Like in every movie, there's like a moment where the people rally around him, but I feel like it's not earned in the same way that with Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, where like it just feels very random. Like, why do these people like all like for 1 minute everyone hates him and like the Daily Bugle saying all this stuff about him, and the next everyone's rallying around him. Whereas, yeah, I'd agree with Andrew Garfield. It definitely feels more earned because you see the ways that he interacts with everybody individually, and you see even with the first one how he saves the one guy's kid's life. And then that guy is the one who kind of arranges all the cranes to help him get across the city. So I like that kind of element of it for sure.
Or like there's scenes where like or Spider-Man, like his Spider-Man would go up to a kid and he's like, cool turbine, like this is how it works. And he's like, let me walk you home. And I'm like, Spider-Man would do that. He would walk a kid home. Like, you know, he would stop what he's doing, walk a kid home and just like be part of the neighborhood. And I really like that. I would also argue his whipping around the city in the Andrew Garfield ones are awesome. That's like one of my favorite parts of Spider-Man movies is seeing him like just whip around New York and things like that. And I don't think you get that with Holland Spider-Man very often. You don't see that cool type of web swinging action.
Yeah, for sure. You definitely feel like, I'd say even with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, you definitely feel like you're in New York. And I think you do with Tom Holland as well. But I think those establishing shots of Spider-Man, just like the classic, like swinging through the buildings, like he's like New York's superhero, and you like to see the fact that he's in his element and in his environment.
Yes. And I think there's something to be said about like, well, Holland Spider-Man doesn't need to do that. And it's like, yeah, I guess like it's cool that he's in like Europe today or in space and stuff like that. But just give me a few scenes of him just doing cool ass tricks and shit through buildings in New York, and I'll be happy. I can watch that shit for like an hour straight, just doing cool stuff. Anyways, we haven't even talked about the movie yet. So let's talk about this movie, Spider-Man No Way Home. It's the end of the trilogy and kind of the whole arc that they've been setting up. And I would say with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, I've always really liked him. Like once he got introduced, I'm like, yes, like he feels like a kid. He is a kid when he got hired. He was a kid and he's very quippy. He's all this other stuff. The only complaints that I had was that like, yes, not enough thwippy action around the city, and that his suits, some of his suits didn't like as much, I guess. Like, I think I got over the Iron Spider suit, which I'm happy to report that they kind of got rid of the suit like halfway through this movie. You know, like it's just like, if everything is Tony Stark inspired, I really like when you can just put on a mask. It's just a guy in like a onesie kind of, or a tights, you know, where like Tom Holland Spider-Man's just like activating kill mode, activating this. Let me scan your body, and I'm like, I don't know. Spider-Man doesn't usually do that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that for sure. I feel like the suit stuff doesn't bother me as much, but like you said about Tom Holland actually being like a teenager, like that, I think that's probably why the Tom Holland movies are probably my favorite of the three, or no, I guess not three trilogies, but three different series, because there are some times when I'm looking at Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and I know that they're much older than, they're
Tobey
supposed to
Maguire
be in the movie.
especially.
Oh yeah. Well, even Andrew Garfield, he was in his 30s, I think, and he looks a lot younger than he is. But even then, it's like it brings me out of it sometimes when he's being like bullied by this bully who also looks like he's in his 30s. I'm like, okay, I can't believe that this is high school. Whereas the Tom Holland movies, like it just feels like they're in high school.
Yes.
Like they just
and they
feel
act
like
like
normal
they're in
kids.
high school too,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah. Even with the first movie, it's like Gwen Stacy has to be a model and a science student. Like they all have to have all of these different talents and stuff. Whereas I feel like in the Tom Holland movies, like everyone's just like a normal kid, and I love that.
Yeah, yeah. There's a famous scene in Spider-Man 2, the Tobey Maguire one, where his mask is off or whatever, and some guy on the train's like, "Oh my God, he's just a kid," and
like, no,
and everyone's like,
like,
"This guy's like 40 years old." Like, what are you talking about?
I know, gets me every time.
Tobey Maguire just always looks so old. I guess whatever. I'll move on from that. Yeah, with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, like yeah, you're right. He just feels like a kid, and like everything he's going through is very kid-like. Include like just navigating his relationships with his friends. You feel like he's just like, man, I got the Spider-Man stuff going on, and I really want to be an Avenger, which was never the case for these other movies, right? But at the end of the day, like I want to ask MJ out. That's
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
build
for
Lego
sure.
with my best friend, that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
it feels more real, and also not like the whole drama of the relationships doesn't have to be like the main drama of the movie, which I kind of feel like sometimes with the Tony Maguire especially was it would take away from everything else a little bit. Like, are MJ and Spider-Man gonna get together? We'll find out.
I would say Gwen Stacy, Emma Stone in Andrew Garfield's movies was, I thought, way better than MJ, like Kirsten Dunst's. And I think it all comes down to the writing at the end of the day. I think this is why Amazing Spider-Man 2 failed, was I think the lack of good story structure and writing in those movies really brought it down. Like, who cares about the lizard, I guess. And then in the second movie, if you even remember, there was Electro, there was Harry Osborn as Green Goblin, there was, I forget, something else too. Like there was it just felt all muddied and stuff like that. But with Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy, I felt like she was much more connected to Andrew Garfield, maybe because they were dating, at the time and stuff like that. And you could feel the relationship, and you felt like Emma Stone brought something to the character.
Yeah.
And she spoke for herself too. It was much more refreshing, where MJ is just like everything revolved around Peter, and the affirmation from Peter, and like this damsel in distress, all this other stuff, where Emma Stone's just like, you can't tell me what to do, I'm doing this because I want to do this. She's much more independent in that way, right?
Oh yeah, I love that. And I think like even I was rewatching the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, and then the second one when MJ leaves the altar to come to Spider-Man, she has this one line that's like, can't you like respect that I can make a choice or something like that? And it's like, you haven't earned that like at all, as far as like your whole character is that you don't have any choices. Yeah. And that sometimes you're screaming more than you have any dialogue. And that was always annoyed me. It's like, how many times does MJ need to scream and get captured? Like those movies,
every time.
Definitely, there's a lot of repetition in those movies, which, it's like at the time, I feel like was kind of how superhero movies were supposed to, that was the formula, right?
Yeah.
Which has definitely changed over time. So I think looking back, we can kind of see how that maybe was a little bit more problematic than anything else.
So I would say with Spider-Man No Way Home, it's definitely the most ambitious live action Spider-Man that's ever been made. And, you can tell it's been, maybe, I'm not sure if you can tell, but it's definitely feels like it's the live action version sort of Into the Spider-Verse, where that's one of my favorite movies. I think.
Yes, I didn't even talk about that one.
I know,
it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Me too. Like, it's just so good. It makes me feel things. It looks amazing. I think it's still probably the best Spider-Man movie, probably. And then this one is like second for me. Like I really, really like Spider-Man No Way Home. And we'll find out in just a second why. Like, well, I think I can safely say that like it honors the legacy of all the other Spider-Man movies that came before it. So like a quick synopsis of this movie, and now we're going to start getting to spoiler territory. So for people at home, just watch out, I guess. But with Spider-Man No Way Home, you have a big kind of responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility to close out this trilogy of movies, and also kind of bring closure to the movies that came before it that weren't even part of this franchise, right? So you have Tom Holland, or Peter Parker, who is known to the world now. Mysterio has let out the beans in the bag and whatever, and everyone knows who Peter Parker is. And it's really cool to see that, because I don't think I've seen that on the big screen of everyone knowing who Peter is. And it's a big deal, right? You get Doctor Strange in the mix, which I love seeing Benedict Cumberbatch and stuff, because, I mean, I love him. He's great. Great mustache. Weird beard sometimes. And then and then you have this idea of the multiverse, which I think is a really big thing in general, pop culture and otherwise, of the multiverse, the metaverse, all this other stuff. So I think we're going to reach a point where we're going to be like, I'm kind of tired of everything crossing over, but not in this movie. I was not tired in this movie where things started coming, because we started seeing some classic villains, which was teased in the trailer of Doc Ock, Jamie Foxx's Electro, which, by the way, they did such a better job with his Electro in this movie than they ever did in Spider-Man 2, Amazing Spider-Man 2. And we get, Green Goblin as well. So what do you think about this idea where in the old Spider-Man movies, one of the biggest things in Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2, juggling villains, like it's always been a thing where it's like, there's too many villains in this movie, it doesn't work, whatever. This movie has more villains than a lot of those movies, and it works somehow. What do you think? Like, how did they do that?
I think I think the big strength of this movie is all of these villains have already been established and have had previous movies to introduce them. Whereas I feel like, I think that's the crutch of like Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2 is these characters are all getting introduced in that movie, and we are seeing a whole character, like their whole villain origin story and character arc and potentially redemption story all in one movie, and they're all clashing for that spot, plus all the other drama or whatever is going on in the movies. But I also think so I went into watching No Way Home without rewatching all the movies beforehand. I've seen them in the past, but had been a long time. So obviously I didn't remember a lot of things. And even then I felt like I was still able, again, like you said earlier, I think writing is such a strength in this movie, and through like just great writing and kind of bringing in each villain individually, I was still able to kind of like, okay, I kind of catching up on like what I was kind of forgetting where these characters are at, kind of when they're being brought in from their respective universes. And I think that really helped. And I mean, honestly, the crux of No Way Home was kind of trying to give a redemption arc to each one of these villains, which I actually really, really appreciated. I think there's something about Spider-Man villains in particular where they kind of all share they were kind of like normal, nice people, and then something happened to like give them some sort of brain injury or whatever. That like they're all so ripe for redemption, stories. And I think this movie understood that and was like, we're gonna just and we know like Tom Holland's Spider-Man, we know his personality, we know this is something that would be very important to him, and I love how that all came together. So I think that's part of the strength of it too. It wasn't just about villains fighting the hero, but the villains working with the hero to bring about that redemption arc.
Yes, I agree. There is a lot of people on the internet that are like complaining and things like that. It's like, well, why didn't he just send them back? You know, like you didn't even have to have this movie. You could just send them back and they would have been good. But it's not really core to the whole lesson of this movie, right? Like I feel like Marissa Tomei in this movie is so much better than she was in the other movies. She was fine. She was kind of like the hot Aunt May, and I felt like that was kind of it, to be honest with you. Where in this one, it felt like she had agency. She had a lesson to give to Peter. She had an amazing, spoilers, death scene in this movie where it's just, I felt it when she was dying. I was like, oh my God, I didn't think I'd feel this way for this Aunt May, because she hasn't really shown me otherwise in this movie, right? Like,
oh yeah, I was sobbing.
And when it happened, I'm like, oh my, this scene is powerful. Like, that's why Tom Holland's so good in this movie, because like I don't really watch. I haven't really seen a lot of his acting in other movies because I feel like he hasn't really had the best agent to give him like good movies outside of Spider-Man. But in this scene where he's crying, he's like, Aunt May, like wake up, like that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh my God, like, are you kidding me right now?
And it's just the line that she has right before she dies is the classic, with great power comes great responsibility. Like that's like the icing on the cake of like, we don't even know if there was an Uncle Ben in this universe, but we kind of see how Aunt May kind of becomes Uncle Ben for Spider-Man. I think that was just so powerful.
Right. And yeah, so this idea that we have to try helping people, even if it's just like, you know, they might turn back into like a bad person, right? Nobody knows what happens because they probably didn't write it. Nobody knows what happens when we put these characters back in their own universe, right? Like, who knows? We have to imagine like, okay, it could just be like they just go back and everything's just the same, or Peter Parker in this universe actually changed something. And I think that's a better way to think about it. It's kind of like prison reform, I think, like prisoner reform. My partner was thinking about this the other day, where it's just like, we have to try to help these people. Yes, they're bad people, but we're trying to turn them into slightly better people, and not trying is like not an option, right? Like otherwise you're not really a good person.
Well, yeah. And I think it's like, if people are complaining about Tom Holland's driver in this movie of like wanting to help the villains, like you don't really understand the character of Peter Parker, especially Peter Parker in these movies too. I feel like it would be, if they just press the button and sent them all back to their universes, sure, there wouldn't be a movie, but also you don't understand like this character. And it's a very character driven movie as well, which I think is so important.
And it helps that, spoilers, the other Spider-Man are on board with it too, right? They're like, you know what? This makes sense to us. Like, you know, and we'll talk about them in just a second. I'm going to rewind a little bit and talk about like some surprise characters in this movie. Like, this movie just throws you with fan service after fan service.
Oh yeah,
there's no way for us to cover
it all up.
I know, and that's the thing is, like you said before, like the strength of the writing is, even if you haven't watched a Spider-Man movie before, like this is your first, maybe, I think there's still something to this movie where you kind of get the gist of where these characters are coming from. They explain just enough for you to be like, okay, because like you really don't have to watch Amazing Spider-Man 2's Electro or Spider-Man 3 Sandman, right? Like you could, but like you gotta get the gist of what these characters are going for. But let's talk about Charlie Cox, for example, coming back as Daredevil. Huge moment.
So good. Good. I did not know, like, I mean, I'm sure I was avoiding spoilers like the plague for this movie. I went to see it, like, I think on the Monday after the release. So 4 or 5 days. So I was like deleting all my social media and everything. Obviously kind of knew about some of the other characters that were going to appear because people were speculating about that forever. But Matt Murdock, that was a complete surprise to me. And I was like one of those moments where like I was with my sister, I just like hit her on the shoulder because I was like so surprised. And I love that. It's like one of those moments where like I wish I didn't have any other like spoilers or anything for the rest of the movie, because I can't even imagine how I would react. But that was a moment that I was like, I'm glad that wasn't spoiled for me.
The crazy thing is that was such a huge moment for people who knew who Matt Murdock is and Charlie Cox's Daredevil, which, by the way, is a fantastic show. If you were to watch any of the Netflix Marvel shows, just watch Daredevil 1, 2, and 3. It's still really good. Everything else is fine. So when that happened, it was just like, oh, how are they going to top this? And then they keep doing it, right? Like, I feel like when people talk about this movie, they kind of almost forget that Charlie Cox is in this movie because everything else that's going on, right? Yeah. But it was really cool just to see him. And then we also see, let's see, what other surprise characters do we see in this movie? I guess we can talk about the big ones here. At some point, we do see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. You wonder why we talk so much about them leading up to this. So we have like Ned, who's like summoning them through the portal, which is really fun to see that he has like magic capabilities a little bit. And the way he does it, it's really funny too. And yeah, they step through and our theater just erupted.
Same. Yeah, it was such a good introduction too. Because I feel it. So it's so funny because I think because it was such a mundane scene to start of just like Ned and MJ just like hanging out with Ned's grandma, and like a bunch of people in my theater went to use the bathroom at that point, and because it just seemed like it was just like a mundane scene, and I felt so bad because a lot of them came back like halfway through Tobey Maguire's entrance, but like such a good entrance, like so good. Like like as soon as Andrew Garfield took off the mask, like everyone just erupted in applause. It was, and I think at that point, like my theater probably all knew was happening again. We were like a week into the movie,
Yeah.
but it was still such a
It's
fun
still
hype
good,
moment.
right? And like, this is not breaking any ground, but I'm so happy for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man in this movie. Like, truly, they're calling for the Amazing Spider-Man 3. They want it. Everyone wants it now, which is crazy because those two movies suck. But or they're not suck. They're just completely fine. But I do agree that it'd be awesome to see the Amazing Spider-Man 3 and see what happens, spin his character off and do his own thing and see, because he was so good in this movie. He gets closure to some big moment that we'll talk about in just a second. And yeah, I think he was just really funny too. He just brought a lot of energy to the movie. And you can tell that he's probably the best actor in the entire
And
movie.
you could tell that he just loves being Spider-Man too. You could tell that he was just waiting for this call to come back. Like he, you know, that the moment they asked him, he said yes. I think with Tobey Maguire, he was probably like, yeah, but I'm not wearing the suit for half this movie. So that's probably why he shows up, you know, looking like a youth pastor or whatever. But I think you can just tell Andrew Garfield was just like so ready to be back and was just so excited to be there.
Yes, because famously, Andrew Garfield was probably the most pumped to be Spider-Man out of the three of them. Like, he wanted to be Spider-Man when he was young. He kind of finally got the call. He put everything he wanted into the role. There's a line where he did an interview where he said, "What if MJ was a dude?" And I'm like, exploring Peter Parker's like bisexual side or whatever like that. And people apparently studios were like, shut that down. You got to take that back. And it was too progressive at the time. Yeah. So he was just like, okay. And it got really muddied. And then at the time they were trying to do their own Avengers thing where they're trying to make a Sinister Six movie. That's why the problem with Amazing Spider-Man 2 is that they set up all these villains and they forgot about the plot of the movie that they were in, kind of thing. So unceremoniously, Andrew Garfield did not get another movie, but it kind of worth it because he was so good in this one. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Let's talk about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man a little bit. Yeah, what did you think about his return?
I thought it was really good, honestly. Like, I think he did bring a little bit more joy to the role here, and I think maybe that was just being around like Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland, who I think are just overall funnier Spider-Man. But I think he did bring a lot more joy. I love the scene with him and Andrew Garfield just like on the scaffolding, kind of setting things up and just like going back and forth, talking about their own experiences being Spider-Man. Like, I really love that moment. I feel like that was just that was a moment that's like, oh my gosh, like we're seeing the Spider-Mans on screen. Like, it wasn't even the moment where they're fighting together. It was like the moment where they're like talking about their experiences being
all
Peter
of them
Parker
too.
And their respective. Yeah, exactly.
Like, you got Tobey Maguire being like, you're amazing, like a nod to him being an amazing Spider-Man. You got the fun like back scene with Tobey Maguire's back, which if people at home don't know, Jake Gyllenhaal almost became Spider-Man in Spider-Man 2 because Tobey Maguire had a back problem. He had a huge back problem. He almost had to like get out of. I did
not know that.
Yeah, so that was a nod to that, where like Tobey Maguire, like I think it's but during Seabiscuit and Spider-Man 1, like his back was really starting to act up, and he didn't think he could do the second movie. So they were already trying to recast Peter Parker, and then eventually. Good thing Tobey Maguire was able to stay on, but they wanted to do a nod on it in this movie, which I think was really great. And it's just a silly scene of Andrew Garfield cracking his back and stuff like that. And then a fun conversation of like, where's your web fluid coming from your wrist? Like, I think that's
the stuff that like, if they're going to talk about anything, that's the stuff I love that they're talking about. Like, just like bringing up, like, that's always something I thought about. Like, where does this like come from? Like, I'm always thinking about it, watching like the Tobey Maguire movies. I love that they brought that up. And honestly, I really did love the moment where, again, spoilers, but at the end, when Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is kind of stopping Peter Parker from having his own villain moment and stabbing Green Goblin. Yeah. I love that Tobey Maguire was the one to step in. And I saw this really good parallel on TikTok by how in the first Spider-Man movie, Tobey Maguire like has to stop Green Goblin's glider from hitting himself,
Mhm.
and it's the shots are very parallel to when he's actually
Oh,
stopping Tom Holland from killing Green Goblin. So I thought that was a really
fun.
cool kind of nod as well.
That's fun. That's really good. I think like, yeah, his Tobey Maguire, or sorry, his Peter Parker in his Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire's is such more wiser now. You can tell years have passed since their movies, which is what I mean. Like it's good. It's a good sequel to their characters. It's very true to who these characters are. So it's not like Tobey Maguire's entering, he's being de-aged, and he's just like, I'm Spider-Man again. It's just like, no, I ended up with MJ. I'm much more mature now. I have wise words to share. I know the cure
Mm-hmm.
for Norman Osborn's like Green Goblin disease thing. And then Andrew Garfield is coming from a place of like not pulling his punches anymore. Gwen Stacy just died, doing his best, but like this is just the Peter Parker way kind of thing. And it's cool to see that
Mm-hmm.
they're all Peter Parker and they've all lived through this great power comes great responsibility, but they all have separate lives too, right? And when they show this brotherhood, this idea of them being brothers, and Andrew Garfield being like, I always wanted brothers, you can feel it, right? Like it's very cute.
So good. Yeah, another moment that I was like, I was crying the whole end of that movie. But yeah, that was a moment that I was like, sobbing in the theater.
When they're all like doing their like they all suit up and they're all like next to each other doing their Spider-Man pose, like, and there's like a dark background and stuff like that. Like I was just like, oh my god, just nerd meltdown in my seat. But I didn't share this earlier. I think I messaged you about this. Our theater, we went on opening night. They went nuts, like so crazy. It was a very energetic theater, which was good and bad because they were like, they would cheer about everything. Like it would be like you see Tobey Maguire come on, yeah, rightfully so. Charlie Cox, yeah. Any action scene, they're like, yeah, you seeing what's happening? And I'm like, okay, this is kind of fun, but a little bit much. And then it would be like, there was a scene where you see Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire in this one scene, and then you see them again in the next scene. At the top of the building, giving Peter Parker or Tom Holland like a pep talk and stuff like that. And then when they show a shot of Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire again, the people in the audience were like, oh my God. And I was like, you just saw them in the last scene. You knew they were coming. Like there's no reason to freak out right now. And then one guy in the audience was like, foreshadowing. And it's just like, okay,
No,
this is
that's
too
too
much.
much for me. Like I like a hype theater, like that's fun, but
Right.
like that's just like you're taking me out of the movie at that
I
point. I
know.
want to be able to be like immersed in it too.
I was convinced the person didn't know what foreshadowing was, but but also I was just like, I can be annoyed or I can just ride this out because I don't want these people to ruin my first Spider-Man No Way Home experience. You know,
It's
there's
very wise of you.
too much going on in this movie that I need to absorb it. Let's move on a little bit. I'm going to pivot to 3 more things, and we got to wrap up soon. I got a massage soon. Is that J.K. Simmons returned in this movie? And I don't think we get enough love for the people on the internet. Like we were pumped to see him at the end of Far From Home, but he's so good in this. He's born to
So
play
good.
this role, Jonah J. Jameson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I oh my goodness. I was dying at his scenes when he was like promoting his like supplements. I was like, oh man, this is like what the
Alex
metaphor they're
Jones.
going for here is just not subtle at all. It's totally Alex Jones' character.
Yeah.
So funny. Yeah, but I also thought it's so yeah, he's great. And I mean, I think he's the star of the first Spider-Man movies. Like where Tobey Maguire maybe didn't bring a lot of humor, he definitely did. Every
Yes.
scene with him is so funny. And I think it was great to see him. I love seeing him at the end of Spider-Man 2. Just seeing our Spider-Man home or Far From Home. I always get these so confused. Far From Home because they're far from home. That was a great scene as well. I guess I'm like kind of confused as far as like, is he just the same guy in every universe? Like, is he just the same?
Yeah. I think
Like,
there's a level of that you have to kind of accept whatever they're showing you and that there's not a lot of answers that you'll get for every question. Because if you really break down this movie, there are plot holes in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
And
yeah.
I don't think that's a healthy way to absorb this movie. Just like if you're trying to talk about like, well, Endgame's time travel doesn't make sense. It's like, just shut your brain off and don't think about it, right? Like in this movie, you have that, right? Like which Jonah J. Jameson are we getting? I think it's just this universe is Jonah J. Jameson and it just happens to look like, J.K. Simmons. That's how I view it. But I also don't think it matters. Like in this movie as well, you get Electro being pulled in. Electro did not know who Peter Parker was. The whole point of Doctor Strange's spell was that it's trying to draw all the villains who found out who Peter Parker is. So why is Electro here? You know,
interesting. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I have the mindset of like, if I'm like not, if my first time watching a movie, if I'm not seeing these plot holes and they're not distracting me from the overall heart of the movie and the plot of the movie, I don't really mind at all. I think that was the same with me. Like after the movie, everyone was talking about like, oh, like, so do people like just on Earth forget who Peter Parker is? Yeah. The whole world. Like I get there when you, as soon as you get around like spells and people forgetting and all this stuff, there's so many plot holes that come up. But I didn't notice any of that in my first viewing. And I feel like at that point, it's like, I don't really care. It didn't distract me from the movie. It didn't take anything away from it.
I think it's the poison of the MCU, right? Like I love all the stuff that's connected, but it's really hard to not think about like, what are they going to do next to like address this thing, right? Like, and I think the answer is that Doctor Strange gets his own movie and it's the multiverse of madness, right? And they'll figure something out on that end. Yeah. So we had J.K. Simmons. What else did I want to bring up in my final? I almost went through this entire conversation without bringing this up. But okay, first of all, Doc Ock, Alfred Molina, and Willem Dafoe. Especially Willem Dafoe.
So good.
Let's give love to Doc Ock for a second. Like he is so good as this villain. I love Doc Ock, and I think it was a really great return to this character. And there's a lot of funny moments being like, what? There's magic in this world. And some may say that like, yes, like there's a lot of the Marvel humor and it can undercut some serious moments and stuff like that. I think they balanced it pretty well in this movie. I think some of the villain jokes probably not as funny as others, but I had a really great time regardless. But with Doc Ock, I just love that the thing that I told you earlier that I loved about his villain was that he was a villain, but he's also controlled by these tentacle things. And when he gets back in control of the tentacle things, he's a good guy. Like he's done bad things, but he's a good guy. He does the same thing in this movie, right? Like he fights Electro along with the Spider-Mans and like all this other stuff. So I really like Alfred Molina's character, but Willem Dafoe.
Oh my goodness. So good. Honestly, great. Like that was one where I was actually surprised they didn't give him more, like they didn't give him the level of like introduction, I think, that they gave Doc Ock. Like kind of the first time we see Willem Dafoe is when he's in like that alley and like classic Mask is talking to him, which is like great, classic. But I was like, man, I feel like I'd be cheering and screaming for Willem Dafoe coming on. And I feel like I didn't really get that moment.
Well, you see him in the green, he's in his Green Goblin outfit and he throws a bomb on the bridge, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's true. But he fantastic job in this movie. I really, really appreciated just the performance that he brought. Again, I think similar to Andrew Garfield, you could just tell that he was waiting for that call to come back to this movie, and he just like brought everything. And you know, it's been years and years since he's played this character, and still it feels like not a day has passed.
I would argue he did a better job in this movie than his Spider-Man 1 movie. I would argue that like his characterization of Green Goblin is much more nuanced here, I think, because it's again, it's like one of those like prison reform type of things, or even like he plays into like a little bit of homelessness and loneliness and like all this, like someone's living in his brain, mental health, all this other stuff, right? Like you can tell that like you got Norman Osborn, and then you have the Green Goblin that's living in his head that wants to control everything, and at any moment he can snap. And he wants to get help. Like that's what Norman Osborn wants. He wants to get help. But the Green Goblin side of him comes out eventually. And when that transformation happens, it is ridiculous. Like Willem Dafoe's face transforms. You can see it in his eyes and his mouth and his wide smile and the way he talks. Like it's just like, whoa. And I saw a great interview that was just like, yeah, he wouldn't come back unless he did all his own stunts. And he's 66 years old. So
that's insane. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah. And I'm thinking like he had a lot of stunt scenes, because there's like that whole scene where they're like, I mean, I'm assuming that he didn't do like every stunt of going through all the like building, scaffolding and the building and the different floors. Like that was ridiculous. But like, yeah, that's so impressive. And again, I think just shows just how excited he was to be back, which you can just feel that when you're watching him on screen.
I think it's one of my favorite MCU villains is this Green Goblin, which is crazy, right? It's just a character that wants chaos. He's just like, if you have power, you should use it. It's not, he doesn't have daddy issues. He's not Thanos. There's no like this layer. It's just a good to see like this really, I don't know, looming force that just wants bad things to happen and people to let loose, right? And his face he makes when Spider-Man's just punch him in the face. And he's just laughing and smiling, just taking it in. He's just like, I love it. Punch me again. Ugh. Shivers.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. I feel like he definitely, I feel like maybe his first performance was more, I think Smeagol-esque, and I feel like I did
Smeagol,
it was like when he's talking in the mirror to himself. I'm like, but again, I feel like these movies came out the same year, so who knows? But
I understand what you're going for here.
Yeah, but that's kind of like the feel I got. But I feel like, yeah, I agree. I feel like there was, even when his Green Goblin character was so like dramatic, I feel like it was not in the cheesy way of like the first Spider-Man movie. It definitely felt more subtle, even though it was so over the top in a way, which I really liked. It was just a really good performance, and I'm not like I'm not a professional in acting or anything, but I could be like, yeah, that was like just like
but
a
you took
really
film studies. You should.
Yeah, no, not acting studies.
Yeah, like, and I think his placement in the movie and how he affects, like, you know, Aunt May and Peter Parker, like he kills Aunt May basically, right? And that's huge. That's I don't know. I love that he got to like just make a meal out of this performance. Two more things I want to bring up before we bring things home is I said I would bring it up sooner, but I think one of my favorite parts in the entire movie is when Andrew Garfield catches MJ.
Oh, same.
It is
so good.
You can feel it in the way he acts it. And it's a big parallel to it's Amazing Spider-Man 2, very famous. Gwen Stacy dies. There's a scene where at the top of the clock tower, something about Green Goblin, his universe's Green Goblin does something and the whole building's starting to crash and he needs to save a falling Gwen Stacy and he's just too late. He catches her and the web makes a very dramatic, it turns into like a hand. It's very cheesy and it catches Gwen Stacy. But basically, she hits the floor and then she rises up and she's dead right away. And then in this one, he has another chance to do a redemption and he saves MJ and he's like crying and he's like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, I'm feeling all the things right now.
So good. Honestly, a highlight for me too. Just like such a good moment. So emotional. Again, I was crying this whole movie. It was another moment that I was crying. I think Andrew Garfield, again, seeing him cry was making me cry too. But that was a moment that like I had actually seen a lot of people like kind of predict that was going to happen.
Yeah.
Because like it's such, and you see in the trailer too that they released, we see MJ falling. So we knew that was going to happen. And everyone was kind of speculating, oh, what if Andrew Garfield's like, wouldn't that be so good? And even going into that, knowing that that was likely going to happen, it was still so satisfying and so well done.
Yeah. Some people were like, I told you it would happen. I'm like, great. I kind of knew too, but it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't take away from this.
Exactly.
Yeah. It would suck if it didn't happen. Right. Like,
right.
Yeah. The last thing I want to bring up is I like where they left off this Peter Parker at the end of the movie. The end of the movie is Doctor Strange saying, or Peter being like, just erase Peter Parker from everyone's mind. And it's very emotional seeing him say goodbye to MJ and Ned. And I felt it, right? And then the coffee scene afterwards where he's at the shop saying like about to introduce himself as Peter Parker, or he does say he's Peter Parker, but he's going to introduce himself and tell the whole story. And then is like, you know what? My friends are more safer this way. Like I can protect them and they don't have to deal with the bullshit that comes with knowing Spider-Man. And then he goes off on his own. He's truly alone. I think that's the true arc of Peter Parker and really felt like the character to me in the comic books, because I always felt like Tom Holland's Peter Parker was a little too privileged. He got Tony Stark's like new suit pretty quickly. He became an Avenger. He went to space. He was supposed to be Tony Stark's like successor. He got the glasses. He got the machine that can do everything. And I'm like, but where's the struggle? Where's the financial struggle? Where's like all this other stuff? And I felt like they did a good reset of this character at the end of this movie.
Yeah, I'd agree. It's actually something I didn't even think about until rewatching the other Spider-Man movies, but I feel like such a quintessential part of Spider-Man's character is the fact of like is his identity in a way that I think like not every superhero, like some do, but not every superhero really grapples with. Like in the Tobey Maguire, like literally like at the end of the first movies, MJ's like, I love you. And he has to be like, I can't be with you because he knows that like being with him will hurt her. And like in the Amazing Spider-Man, like same with, he promises Gwen Stacy's dad that they're not going to be together because he doesn't want to hurt her. So I feel
breaks
like
that promise instantly.
Immediately. Exactly. But the beat of that story was still there, which I think is such an important be in like in every Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like even though like Tom Holland his Spider-Man didn't like tell MJ or Aunt May and everyone right away, you still get that over time.
Yes.
I don't think there's the same grappling that he had, like the other Spider-Mans had. And I think I love this kind of arc for Tom Holland's Peter Parker, because I think this is such a core part of the Peter Parker character.
Agreed.
And I think he's getting it in a whole new way that's so different than how the other Spider-Mans kind of came about that. Like now there's all this, like everyone's forgotten him and there's like a whole new kind of twist to it, but you still kind of get that heart. Yes. And I absolutely love that.
It's an exciting new reset for the character, and I'm curious what happens next. I would be surprised if MJ and Ned weren't in the other movies, maybe as minor characters at first and that kind of stuff. But I assume we'll see a Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy and all this other stuff as this Peter Parker goes to college. And his new suit, awesome, by the way. I love it. It's so shiny, so shiny. Anyways, last thing was the post-credit scenes. We get a trailer for Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. I'm very excited about that. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And there's a little spoilers, what if little reference at the end of the Doctor Strange.
I've actually never seen What If, so I didn't get that. Now I'll have to go watch it and find out.
It's probably my least favorite of the Marvel shows, but it's apparently very important and it definitely ties into what's happening here. So you should probably watch it. Yeah.
All right. Good to know. Good to know.
And my favorite and not favorite post-credit scene was the Venom one. Why it's not my favorite is because I fucking hate Tom Hardy's Venom. Those movies are bad. I try to like them. I love Venom as a character, but they just do him so dirty. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, I've complained a lot about on this show. I just think it's just one of the worst films I've seen all year for sure. But in the end of that movie, spoilers for you, Emily, I guess, if you're ever going to watch it, is at the end of that movie, there's like a blip that happens and you see Tom Holland's Peter Parker on screen where Tom Hardy's like looking at the screen and being like, who's that? And Venom comes out. It's like, I like him. He looks tasty. And I'm like, oh no, there's going to be a crossover, isn't there? But at the end of this movie, you have Tom Hardy and you have the stupid Venom voice that comes out and you have Danny Rojas from Ted Lasso in the scene. And it's a whole thing like, let's meet Peter Parker. And then he blips away. And then a little Venom symbiote gets left behind. So that just says that, like, okay, Tom Hardy is going to go do his own thing. And then a new Venom can happen in this universe, which is great because they're so tonally different. To see Tom Hardy and Tom Holland interact would be not good, I think. And now everyone is itching for Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man to interact with Tom Hardy's Venom. What do you think about that? Yeah.
Well, I've never seen the Venom movie, so I can't really speak to them that much. But my understanding was they weren't really part of the MCU. So yeah. I think that this was kind of a good intro to bring Venom into it, but like kind of give Tom Hardy his own thing, like you said. I'm here for, if we're going to give Andrew Garfield a third Spider-Man movie, I don't care who the villain is. I don't care. Give this man another Spider-Man movie. It could just be him on screen for, like 120 minutes and I'd be here for it. So that's kind of how I feel. Like I don't really have a lot of attachment to Venom and like don't really care too much about that. But like anything to get Andrew Garfield another Spider-Man movie, I'm here for.
I agree. I guess if they wrote it well, it'd be good. It's just that Sony, outside of Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies, like has done some pretty bad offshoot Spider-Man stuff like Venom. And then they're doing Morbius, the living vampire, which nobody cares about, but Jared Leto's going to be in it. And it's like, cool. I guess he kind of knows Venom because that's connected. And then they're making like a Black Cat movie and like all these like villain movies that are kind of related to Spider-Man, but like Spider-Man's not in it. Like Kraven the Hunter, like Madam Web, all these characters that most people don't know about. And you're like, what? I just want to see Spider-Man.
Right.
So if you get Andrew Garfield, my only hope is that, yes, get him, make him funny, make him good. But for the love of God, make a good script for him because Andrew Garfield deserves it. If you're going to put Andrew Garfield in these Venom movies and it's just as good, quote unquote, as those Venom movies, I don't want that for Andrew Garfield because it'd be bad. It'd be bad. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Get us some better writing. You know what? I mean, as long as it's not the Sam Raimi, right? Like what was writing for those movies, I think it'll be just fine.
You don't want to have those long looks where they're just like standing a foot apart and being like, But MJ, I can't. But
Oh my
Peter,
goodness.
I love you. Tell me you love me. Just kiss me. Just kiss me. But you're with Harry. Just,
Oscar worthy right there.
uh, Emily, I know I've kept you longer than I said I would. What is your final thoughts and review of Spider-Man No Way Home?
Oh, I love Spider-Man No Way Home. And I think there for a lot of reasons. And I think there are some complaints I've seen about Spider-Man No Way Home being just kind of like fan service. Which I think to an extent it is. Like it definitely
100%.
is because of like fans that things in that movie happened. But I absolutely loved every minute of it. Every minute of it was just so fun, so exciting. It was so fun to be in theaters to see it. I'm so glad that we were not, locked down and having to watch it on a TV screen, because it was just so fun to have that energy in the theater. And I just had a whole lot of fun with it. And definitely highlights for me were, like you said, when Andrew Garfield caught MJ, and just every moment of having those Peter Parkers just interact with one another. It was just so special and so fun. As someone who has, been watched Spider-Man movies since I was very young, and has all of those different Spider-Mans have special places in my heart. It was just really fun and really special, and I really enjoyed it. So I don't know, I'd give it, 5 stars, 5 webs.
5 stars.
I don't know, whatever we're gonna give it as far as a rating system. It was honestly like you said, there's plot holes, there's things about it that aren't perfect, but to me, a perfect movie is one that I have a lot of fun seeing and really enjoy and think about a lot after. I'm able to talk about it for, over an hour with a friend.
Yeah.
That's how you know it's a good movie.
Yes.
So I really enjoyed it.
I'm going to echo everything you said. I had a blast with this. This is my favorite Tom Holland Spider-Man movie. I would argue it's my favorite live action Spider-Man movie. It's kind of like Endgame, where it gets better because it rewards the nerds that have watched everything before that. And I think that's okay. If you haven't seen it before, then I would recommend going back and maybe watching this movie. But I think it still stands as a very good movie on its own. I think it's definitely the darkest Spider-Man movie that we got. It goes through a lot of emotional highs and lows, I guess, when it turns, what Peter is going through, I think is like very like, oh, this is getting kind of like heavy and stuff. I think the levity that they bring into it and the humor that they have in it kind of lift it up again. So I think they balance that incredibly well. And I just love the thwipping around with Spider-Man kicking ass and saving the day, and all these villains get put together and all the cameos. I think this movie was just a complete joy front to back. And if you don't like it, then I don't like you. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's not a true review. That's your own opinion, I guess. But it's hard to see someone really shit on this movie unless you're the person that just wants to pick things apart, I guess. But yeah. Into the Spider-Verse. I want to watch that next.
Oh, same. Such a good one.
It's just so good. It's just so good. Okay, that's it for today's episode of Talking Tongue. You can find the rest of the shows in the Pod Cavern at www.podcavern.com. Check out all the shows there. We'll be back in 2 weeks. I think we're going to do The Matrix next. I suppose I should go to the theaters to watch that. And Emily, for yourself, thank you for being a guest on today's show.
No, thanks, Tom. This was fun.
It was fun, but
feels like just one of our meetings at work, but it was recorded.
But honestly, much more productive. Do you want to end the show with your world famous catchphrase?
Oh, my world famous catchphrase, web on.
Okay, bye everyone.